Now some of you may be wondering, what is a Suez? The Suez is a canal that starts in the Mediterranean and makes its way down to the Red Sea. It's very important. The Suez Canal lets someone get from Europe to the East Indies in 2/3 less the time it would take to go around the Horn of Africa. And this is really important, especially for countries like Britain and France, who had a lot of colonies over there, and a lot of colonies kind of everywhere. Not only was it economically strategic, it was militarily strategic too. Because if you wanted to take over more land from indigenous people, there's no better way to do it than with speed. But first, let's go back to before the canal was built, so we can get a good understanding of how this all happened. It's the 1860s, and the Ottoman Empire is at its greatest extent. The Ottoman Empire is split up into two different states, one ruled by the Sultan, and the other ruled by a president appointed by the Sultan. The Ottoman Empire has just gotten through a long series of grueling wars in Europe and the Caucasus, and its economy isn't feeling so well. So the Sultan appoints this guy, Muhammad Said Pasha, to rule Egypt and the lower states. He's an ambitious builder and a really big diplomatic face in the region.
The second Said takes power, he sends a letter to this guy, Ferdinand de Lesseps. Lesseps is a really big builder, and he wanted to build a canal from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea earlier, but the previous leader's beloved horse had been shot by a Frenchman, and so he canceled the project. However, with Said in power, in 1859, construction started, and 11 years later, only $50 million over budget and an estimated 30,000 slaves dying in the process, it was finished. Fast forward to 1882. There's a huge independence movement in Egypt, and they successfully secede from the Ottoman Empire and become an independent country. And they're going to hold elections to see who's going to be the leader of that country. And things are finally starting to look wrong. The British gave the Egyptians two options. Either become part of us, or we will make you part of us. And so the Egyptian people really couldn't do anything, so they kind of let the British in. But some important military generals on the Egypt side decided to revolt against the British, and were quickly annihilated. The revolt resulted in a singular battle, the Battle of Tel el-Kebir. The battle went as the British surrounded the Egyptians into one singular trench along the canal, and then proceeded to massacre them with artillery for the next hour and a half before the Egyptians finally surrendered. Congratulations, Egypt. You now get to join the seemingly never-ending list of countries that have been once ruled by the United Kingdom. Good job. World War I and World War II really showed just how important the canal was, and how just a minor 2-week disruption could result in massive shortages in the East Indies. Britain realized how vital this canal was to the survival of their empire, and so they stationed 80,000 troops in the Sinai Peninsula, and 10,000 troops at each end of the canal to defend it. And they genuinely thought this was a good idea, because stationing a ton of troops in a foreign country had never, ever gone wrong before. Game time! You've got 10 seconds to get the answer right. Guess what the people of Egypt did not like? Paying taxes to a government on a different continent and having their population used in foreign wars? Or freedom from British oppression? Now, I don't know what you said, but I know what the Egyptian people said, and they wanted freedom. So in 1952, a military coup took place heavily backed by the public, which ousted the puppet government led by the British and input Gamal Abdel Nasser, a military dictator. Now, there wasn't really anything Britain could do about this because public support for another war would be very low, and they had another problem going on in Europe. So they kind of just let it happen. As long as the canal was in international waters and their ships wouldn't be taxed going through it, they were okay with it. The problem started. If you didn't know, Egypt is mostly desert, so they kind of need to import water from a lot of places. So Abdul Nasser's first major government construction project was to build a dam in Aswan along the Nile River to dam up some water and make it more available for farming uses in the area. Now, the United States and Britain were going to fund this project, but they soon found out that Egypt was siding with the Soviets and buying some guns from them, so they pulled out from the investment, which left Nasser in a tough spot. And so, On July 26, 1956, desperately in need for money to build the dam and wanting to exact revenge on the British and the U.S. for repealing their funds for the dam, he nationalized the canal. Now, what does nationalizing mean? Nationalizing the canal meant for Nasser that he would be able to shut it down anytime he wanted, but most of all, it would let him put taxes on the ships passing through it, which would allow him to fund the dam in Aswan. Now, the international reaction to this was everybody who wasn't part of the Arab alliance really just flipped out, and the Soviet Union kind of sat back laughing, and the US didn't really do anything. Now, the reason for such harsh international backlash wasn't really about the taxation of the canal, but the fact that he stated that no Israeli ships would be allowed through the canal. Israel was a huge ally of the West, and they weren't ready to give up on him. So, in absolute outrage, Britain, France, and Israel, just 3 months after Nasser had nationalized the canal, launched a surprise attack on Egypt. Israeli soldiers swept across the Sinai Peninsula in just under 2 days, while British Marines paratrooped into the canal to secure the edges. However, before they were able to secure the canal, the Egyptians were able to blow up multiple ships inside of the canal and successfully block it. And so, with Israeli, French, and British forces occupying the Sinai Peninsula and outnumbering the Egyptians, it seemed as if they had won the war. That was until Russia threatened to launch nukes on all of them. Now, the second Dwight D. Eisenhower, President of the United States, found out about this, he freaked out. He immediately called for the war to end and submitted a UN resolution to have the Israelis, French, and British back out of the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip. He was extremely scared of nuclear war against the Soviets. And, lucky for him, just about everybody else in the world was scared of war against the Soviet Union, and so the resolution quickly passed and forced the Israeli, French, and British forces to back out by November 7th. This conflict truly brought an end to the age of British imperialism, and also lit the fire that's still raging today between the Arabs and the Israelis over the Palestinian conflict. Those very same ideals that the Egyptians were fighting for then are what the Palestinians are fighting for now in Israel, a state. However, this conflict truly showed how heightened the tensions were between the US and the Soviets, and how reckless the Soviets were willing to be with their nuclear arsenal to get the way they wanted in the world. All in all, this turned out to be a marginal victory for the Soviets, who were able to hold influence in Egypt after the event. Thanks for watching.